At its peak, Blockbuster Video operated more than 9,000 stores in 25 countries. It employed 84,000 people. It was so much a part of American life that the Friday night ritual of choosing a movie at Blockbuster had its own unspoken etiquette. In the year 2000, the company that ran Blockbuster was given the opportunity to buy a tiny, money-losing mail-order startup called Netflix for $50 million. The Room, by the account of the people in it, nearly laughed the offer out of the building. 10 years later, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy. Netflix is now worth hundreds of billions of dollars. This is the long fall of Blockbuster. To understand what Blockbuster was, you have to remember what watching a movie at home used to require. In the early 1980s, the video cassette recorder arrived in American living rooms, and with it came a strange new problem. You owned a machine that could play movies, but you owned almost no movies. A single videotape, bought new, could cost $80 or $100, so an industry grew up to solve it. Small video rental shops, often a little disreputable, opened in strip malls across the country, and most of them were cramped, poorly stocked, and unpredictable. In 1985, a businessman named David Cook opened the first Blockbuster video store in Dallas, Texas. And Blockbuster's idea was simple, and for its moment, it was genius. It would be the opposite of the small, seedy rental shop. It would be big, brightly lit, clean, and family-friendly. It would carry thousands of titles, organized by category, with multiple copies of the films people actually wanted. It would use a computerized inventory system, borrowed from the world of large retail, to track every tape and to know exactly what each neighborhood was renting. Blockbuster turned a fragmented, local, slightly shady business into a clean national brand. Within a few years, it was opening a new store, somewhere in America, roughly every 17 hours. But there was a second idea inside Blockbuster, and it was less visible, and it mattered more. It was a particular way of making money. A large share of Blockbuster's profits did not come from the rental fee at all. It came from late fees. If you kept a tape past its due date, you paid a penalty, and those penalties added up. By the late 1990s, late fees were generating hundreds of millions of dollars a year. On some estimates, more than a tenth of the company's entire revenue. This is the detail to hold on to because it will reach forward and decide the company's fate. Blockbuster had built a business that quietly, structurally, depended on annoying its own customers. And a company that profits from frustrating you is a company waiting for someone to offer you relief. Through the 1990s, Blockbuster grew into a genuine empire. It was bought in 1994 by the media giant Viacom in a deal worth more than $8 billion. At its height, it had more than 9,000 stores worldwide. In the United States, the company estimated that the majority of the population lived within a 10-minute drive of a Blockbuster. And Blockbuster was not only a store, it was a piece of culture. The phrase "a Blockbuster night" was an advertising slogan, but it described something real. For roughly 15 years, the act of going to Blockbuster on a Friday evening, walking the aisles, reading the boxes, the small negotiation over what the family would watch, the disappointment of finding the new release wall stripped bare was a shared ritual across the country. The company had enormous power over the film industry itself. Studios released films on a schedule built around the rental window. A movie that Blockbuster chose to stock heavily could find an audience. A movie Blockbuster ignored could quietly disappear. Blockbuster was the gatekeeper between Hollywood and the American living room, and it knew it. But an empire built on a specific technology is only as durable as that technology. And Blockbuster's empire rested on a stack of fragile assumptions. It assumed people would always want to leave the house to get a movie. It assumed the video cassette, and later the DVD, would remain the way films traveled. It assumed that its 9,000 stores, the most expensive thing it owned, the leases, the buildings, the staff, were a fortress. In a stable world, that fortress was an enormous advantage. But the thing about a fortress is that it cannot move. And the world was about to start moving very fast. In 1997, a software entrepreneur named Reed Hastings co-founded a company called Netflix. The origin story Hastings often told was a small and personal one. He had rented a movie from Blockbuster, returned it late, and been charged a $40 late fee, and the unfairness of it stuck with him. Netflix began as a service that mailed DVDs to your home in distinctive red envelopes. You kept the disc as long as you liked. There were no late fees, ever. You paid a flat monthly subscription, and when you mailed one disc back, the next one in your list was sent out. For its first few years, Netflix was small, and it was losing money, and it was fragile. And in the year 2000, Reed Hastings and his colleague Mark Randolph flew to Dallas to meet the leadership of Blockbuster. They proposed a partnership. Netflix would run Blockbuster's online presence. Blockbuster would promote Netflix in its stores. And in the course of that meeting, the Netflix founders made an offer. Blockbuster could simply buy Netflix outright. The price they had in mind was $50 million. By the accounts that have been told since, the Blockbuster executives struggled not to laugh. The idea that this tiny, unprofitable, mail-order DVD company was worth $50 million, or was any kind of threat to a global empire of 9,000 stores, struck the room as close to absurd. The Netflix founders flew home. The offer was declined. It is, by almost any measure, the most expensive declined offer in the history of American business. It is easy, looking back, to call the Blockbuster executives fools. They were not fools. In the year 2000, the case against Netflix was strong, and any competent business person could make it. The internet was slow, mailing physical discs was clumsy, the DVD by mail market was tiny. Blockbuster's stores were a real, profitable, dominant business, and Netflix was a rounding error. But the Blockbuster leadership made a deeper mistake than misjudging one small company. They could not imagine that the thing they were best at, the store, the shelf, the Friday night visit, was not a permanent feature of the world. They mistook their fortress for the landscape itself. For a few years in the mid-2000s, it looked as though Blockbuster might actually save itself. And the reason was a single executive who genuinely understood the danger. In 2004, Blockbuster brought in a new chief executive named John Antioco. And Antioco looked hard at Netflix, at the slow rise of online video, at the company's own dependence on late fees, and he understood that Blockbuster had to change or die. Antioco pushed through two enormous decisions. First, in 2005, Blockbuster abolished its late fees. The very late fees that had angered Reed Hastings and helped create Netflix in the first place. Second, in 2004, Blockbuster launched its own online DVD by mail service, Blockbuster Online, and then improved it with a feature Netflix could not match. It was called Total Access. A subscriber could rent the movie online and then return that movie at any physical Blockbuster store and walk out with a free in-store rental. It combined the convenience of mail with the instant gratification of a store, and it worked. Blockbuster Online began signing up subscribers fast enough that Netflix, by its own later admission, was genuinely frightened. But the rescue cost money. Abolishing late fees gave up hundreds of millions of dollars in profit. Building and subsidizing Total Access cost hundreds of millions more. Blockbuster's earnings fell, and its stock fell with them, and an activist investor named Carl Icahn had taken a large stake in the company and joined its board. Icahn and a faction of the board looked at the falling profits and concluded that John Antioco was spending recklessly on a digital future they did not believe in. In 2007, after a bitter fight over his pay and his strategy, Antioco left the company. His successor, under pressure to restore profits, scaled back Total Access and raised its prices. The subscriber growth that had frightened Netflix stalled and then reversed. Blockbuster had been holding the one strategy that might have saved it, and the boardroom, looking only at the next quarter, let go of it on purpose. After 2007, the decline of Blockbuster was no longer a matter of strategy. It was simply a matter of arithmetic, and the arithmetic was merciless. Netflix, freed from the only serious challenge it had ever faced, grew rapidly. And then, in 2007, Netflix did the thing that ended the contest entirely. It launched streaming. Movies and television, delivered instantly over the internet, with no disc, no envelope, no store, and no drive at all. Streaming was the technology that Blockbuster's entire existence was built to resist. Blockbuster's value was its 9,000 stores, and streaming made the store itself obsolete. The company's greatest asset became its greatest burden almost overnight. 9,000 leases, 9,000 buildings to light and heat and staff, 84,000 employees. All of it was a cost, and all of it was now being asked to compete against a service that a customer could use without standing up. Blockbuster also carried close to $1 billion of debt, much of it a legacy of its corporate history. A heavily indebted company, anchored to thousands of expensive physical stores, simply did not have the money or the freedom to reinvent itself fast enough. Blockbuster tried, in its final years, nearly everything. It launched its own streaming and video-on-demand efforts, but they were late, underfunded, and overshadowed. It installed automated rental kiosks to compete with the Redbox machines appearing outside grocery stores. It cut prices. It closed stores by the hundreds, then by the thousands. Each year, the loss was larger, the store count smaller, the debt heavier. By 2010, the company that the majority of Americans had once lived 10 minutes from was closing locations across the country every week. You could walk into a Blockbuster in its last years and feel it. The thinning shelves, the constant going out of business signs, the sense of a place that the world had simply walked past. On September 23, 2010, Blockbuster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The company that had once operated more than 9,000 stores was, by then, carrying roughly $900 million in debt it could not service. The bankruptcy was an attempt to reorganize, to shed debt and leases and survive as a smaller company. It did not work. In 2011, Blockbuster's remaining assets were bought at auction by the satellite television company Dish Network for around $320 million. Dish kept a few hundred stores open for a while, and then fewer still. The closures continued, year after year, until the number of company-owned Blockbuster stores in the United States reached 0. A handful of independently owned, licensed franchise stores hung on the longest. One by one, those closed too. As of the time of writing, there is exactly one Blockbuster video store still operating on Earth. A single franchise location in Bend, Oregon, kept alive in large part as a destination, a piece of nostalgia, a place people visit to photograph a sign. An empire of 9,000 stores had been reduced to a single store that survives, essentially as its own museum. You can tell the story of Blockbuster as a story about that one phone call. The $50 million offer for Netflix that the room nearly laughed at. You can tell it as a story about streaming, or about a boardroom that fired the one chief executive who understood the future. All of those moments are real, and any of them, decided differently, might have changed the ending. But the deepest cause is not a single decision. It is a single misunderstanding, and Blockbuster held it from its first day to its last. Blockbuster believed it was in the business of stores. It was not. It was in the business of getting a movie from a studio into a person's living room on a Friday night. The store was simply the method, the best method available in 1985, and a worse method every year after that. Netflix understood from the beginning that the customer never actually wanted the store. The customer wanted the movie with the least possible friction. The store, the drive, the due date, the late fee, those were all friction, and friction is not a business. It is a thing waiting to be removed. Blockbuster's 9,000 stores felt like its great strength, and for 15 years they were. But they were also 9,000 anchors. No competitor truly defeated Blockbuster. Blockbuster was sunk by the weight of the very thing it was proudest of, and by its lifelong inability to see that the fortress was never the point. In the year 2000, Blockbuster was offered the chance to own Netflix for $50 million, and the room could not keep a straight face. 10 years later, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy, and the empire of 9,000 stores shrank, location by location, until a single store remained, kept alive as a place people visit to remember. The Friday night ritual is gone. The blue and yellow sign is a costume now, a thing for photographs. Thank you for watching The Long Fall. If decline stories like this one interest you, the channel will be here.